You ever wake up and feel like the whole world is giving you that look? That quiet little smirk people wear when they know something you don't. Oh, they're polite about it, of course. Humans are such elegant liars. They pat your back, they nod. They say good morning, but their eyes sparkle like they've already seen the punchline, and you're the last one still waiting for the joke to land. Everyone knows they changed last night except you. Isn't that a delightful kind of madness? Watching people walk around with that secret confidence, that new skin they slipped into overnight, while you're still dragging around yesterday's version of yourself like an old coat you forgot to throw away. You know what's funny about people changing? They do it the way thieves work, quiet, quick, and always when you're not looking. They slip into a new version of themselves so gently that by the time you blink, the person you thought you knew has already packed their bags and moved on from who they used to be. And the best part, they expect you to keep treating them like the old version, the outdated model, the one they abandoned like an empty wrapper on the floor. People evolve quietly while you cling to old versions of them, like you're the caretaker of ghosts no one else sees anymore. You hold on to memories, moments, expressions, thinking they still fit, while they've already peeled those skins off and tossed them into the dark corners of last night. It's almost laughable how we trust what we remember more than what's right in front of us. Someone stands there with a new spark in their eyes, a sharper tone in their voice, a different kind of confidence dripping off their shoulders, and you still talk to them like they're soft, familiar, predictable. You keep thinking you know them. You keep assuming nothing has changed. Meanwhile, they're watching you, amused, wondering how long it'll take before you realize that the person you're speaking to isn't the same one you're picturing in your head. They changed while you slept. They shifted while you were busy repeating your routines. They rewrote themselves while you were clinging to yesterday's script. And maybe that's the trick life loves to play, showing you how fast someone can outgrow the version of them you swear is still real. It's unsettling, isn't it? How someone can laugh differently, stand differently, breathe differently, and you can't quite pinpoint when it happened. They're not trying to hide it, but they're not going to explain it either. Because explanations are for people who want to be understood, and they've reached a point where they don't need you to understand. They just need to move, to stretch, to become whatever last night forced them to become. And while they're busy stepping into their new skin, you're busy polishing the old one, thinking you're doing something noble. You cling to their past because it's comfortable, because it makes everything feel safe, controlled, predictable. But comfort is a slow kind of blindness. It makes you miss the subtle tilts, the small shifts, the quiet storms. You think you're paying attention, but you're really holding on to a memory disguised as a person. You're talking to a shadow, while the real figure has already changed shapes behind your back. People don't announce their evolution. They don't send you a warning or a polite little message saying, by the way, I won't be who I was tomorrow. No, they disappear into themselves for a night, confront something only they could see, break through some internal wall, and come out different. And you, still attached to the outdated blueprint, walk in the next day, expecting everything to match what's in your head. But nothing matches anymore. Their voice carries a new weight. Their eyes hold a new decision. Their presence feels like a room rearranged in the dark. You recognize the pieces, but the layout is a stranger. It almost feels like betrayal, doesn't it? Not because they changed, because they didn't wait for you, because they left you in the dust of who they used to be while they climbed into someone new. But why would they wait? Growth isn't a group project. People don't pause their evolution because you're comfortable. They don't slow down because you prefer the old version. They grow in silence and solitude, in those late night moments when the world stops pretending. And if you don't keep up, if you don't open your eyes wide enough to see the shift, then you're left holding on to fragments while they walk around fully rebuilt. And maybe that's the unsettling truth you avoid. You don't cling to the old versions of people because they need you to. You cling because you're afraid of facing the fact that you haven't changed with them. It's easier to believe they stayed the same than to admit you stood still. It's easier to hold on to their past than confront your own reluctance to step into a new one. Because if they can evolve overnight, what does that say about you still living the same day over and over? You know that strange little sting you feel when someone walks into the room and you can tell without a word, without a gesture, that something about them is different. That itch under your skin that whispers, something happened while you weren't watching. That's the beauty of last night's turning point. It wasn't yours, but theirs. While you were tangled in your thoughts, replaying the same old loops, someone else was out there wrestling with a moment big enough to rearrange their whole insides. You didn't see it. You didn't hear it, but you can feel the aftermath like a crack in the air. People don't always change in daylight. They change in the hours when everything is quiet, when the world stops pretending to be busy. Something hits them, an argument, a realization, a truth they can't unhear, a wound that finally spills over, and suddenly the person you knew is gone, not dead, not lost, just replaced with a version forged in a moment you weren't part of. And that's what makes it sting, isn't it? You weren't invited to their transformation. You were a spectator without even knowing the show had started. Imagine them last night, sitting alone with a truth that finally demanded to be faced. Maybe they cracked open under the weight of something they'd been avoiding. Maybe they snapped out of a delusion that kept them soft. Maybe they let go of someone or something, or even a piece of themselves they'd been gripping too tightly. Whatever it was big enough to shift the entire foundation they stand on. And you, unaware, walked into today like nothing changed. But they changed everything. You see it in the way they hold themselves, a little more firm, a little less breakable. You see it in their eyes, not colder but clearer, like they finally wiped the fog off the glass and decided they weren't playing along with the same old script anymore. They don't speak like yesterday's version. They don't laugh with the same softness. Something sharpened inside them, and you're standing there still trying to read them with yesterday's dictionary. And isn't it fascinating how quickly we fall behind? One night, that's all it takes. One night for someone to face something monumental, to rewrite the story inside their skull, to take the pieces of themselves and rearrange them in a way you didn't expect. You think people change slowly, gradually, gently. But real change, the kind that cuts deep, usually happens like a snap. One breath in, one truth confronted, one decision made, and suddenly, there's no going back. They cross their own invisible line, and you don't even know the line existed. The world tells you change is some long, poetic process. But real change is messy, sudden, violent in the quietest way. Last night, something inside them reached its limit. A boundary finally drew itself. A weakness finally got exposed. A strength finally woke up. And that awakening didn't wait for your permission or your comfort. It happened in a moment that belonged to them and them alone. And what does that leave you with? A strange sense of distance. Like you're standing in front of the same face, but the soul behind it walked somewhere you didn't follow. They're answering questions before you finish them. They're seeing through your old assumption. They're not reacting the way they always did. You're confused, but they aren't. They understand exactly what shifted. They lived it. You just arrived late. Maybe the real discomfort isn't that they changed. It's that their change exposes your stillness. Their sudden transformation highlights how long you've been waiting for something to push you, shake you, crack you open. They had their turning point last night. You're still looking for yours. They crossed the threshold. You're still at the doorway, pretending the world hasn't tilted, and you can sense it now, that deep, unsettling truth creeping up the back of your mind. You aren't out of place because they changed. You're out of place because you didn't. You ever notice how the loudest changes in a person make absolutely no sound at all? The world loves to pretend that transformation is dramatic, filled with big speeches, big gestures, fireworks in the sky. But the real shifts, the ones that actually matter, they happen in silence long before anyone else realizes what's going on. You look at someone and think you're seeing today's version of them, but what you're really seeing is the echo of choices they made in the quiet hours when no one was watching. Change sneaks in like a shadow, settles into their bones, and waits patiently for the right moment to reveal itself. People don't transform because someone clapped for them or begged them to improve. They transform because of private wars you weren't invited to. While you were busy assuming everything was the same, they were sitting alone staring at a truth that finally demanded its payment. Maybe it was a memory that hit a little too hard. Maybe it was a realization that stripped them bare. Maybe it was a disappointment so heavy it forced them to rearrange every part of their thinking just to breathe. Whatever it was, it didn't need an audience. It didn't need applause. It just needed silence. You think you know a person because you've seen them laugh, seen them talk, seen them move, but you haven't seen the thoughts they choke back at midnight. You haven't seen the battles they fight behind their eyes. Those are the places where change starts, in the moments when the world is asleep, and they're being dragged face to face with whatever truth they've been avoiding. And when the mind finally gets tired of running, it rewires itself without warning. No noise, no announcement, just a quiet click inside their soul. And you miss it because humans love obvious signs. You want tears, shouting, break down, something dramatic enough to reassure you that something significant happened. But people aren't built like that. Most folks learn to break quietly. They learn to rebuild quietly. They learn to shift direction without telling a single soul because they're tired of explaining themselves to people who only hear what they want to hear. So you stand there confused, wondering when they changed, how they changed, why they changed. The truth is, they changed long before you noticed. You just weren't paying attention to the silence. And silence is dangerous. It hides more than noise ever could. Silence is where decisions are made without hesitation, where boundaries are drawn without negotiation, where people finally admit to themselves what they've been pretending not to feel. And once someone has that private conversation with their own soul, there's no going back. They don't need to announce it. They don't need to warn you. They simply walk into the next day carrying a new version of themselves that doesn't fit into your old expectation. You keep trying to talk to them like they're still who they were, and something feels off. They don't respond the same. They don't soften the same. They don't bend the same way they used to. And you wonder why. You think they're acting strange. You think they're distant. But what you're really seeing is the aftershock of a silent earthquake that reshaped their entire foundation while you slept through it like it was nothing. Silent change is the most powerful kind because it doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't wait until you're comfortable. It doesn't check if you're ready to deal with the new version of someone. It just happens. And when they step into the morning with a different energy, a different strength, a different clarity, you're left trying to understand the shift with yesterday's logic. But yesterday's logic doesn't work anymore because yesterday's version of them no longer exists. And maybe that's why it unsettles you so much. Silent change reminds you how fragile your assumptions are. How easily the people around you can evolve without your input. How little control you actually have over who stays the same and who decides to grow. You expect the world to give you signs, warnings, clues. But life doesn't communicate in neon lights. It whispers, it nudges. It rearranges people quietly in the dark, then lets you deal with the shock in the daylight. And deep down, you know what the silence means. If someone can change so deeply without saying a word, then maybe you can too. You've been waiting for something loud, some big moment, some dramatic push to force you into becoming who you need to be. But every powerful transformation starts the same way theirs did, quietly. Did ever watch someone evolve right in front of you, not because they want to impress you, not because life gave them some grand invitation, but simply because staying the same finally became too painful for them. That's the real punchline in all of this. Others grow faster when you stay comfortable, while you hold on to your familiar little routines like their security blankets. They're out there tearing holes in their old selves just to breathe a little freer. It's almost poetic how your comfort becomes their motivation. How your stillness becomes their reason to move. People don't always grow because it's inspiring. Most of the time they grow because standing still feels like drowning. Last night, while you sat wrapped up in the safety of what you already knew, someone else hit that point where enough was enough. They got sick of the patterns, the excuses, the softness that kept them stuck. They felt that burning in their chest that whispers, "You can't keep living like this." And instead of pushing it away, instead of burying it under distractions, they faced it head on. They did the thing you avoid. They stepped into discomfort. They let it cut them. They let it shape them. They let it change them. And now you look at them today and wonder why they seem different. Why their shoulders sit a little higher, why their voice isn't as shaky, why their eyes don't beg for approval the way they used to. It wasn't magic. It wasn't luck. It was the simple truth that while you were keeping yourself warm inside your bubble, they were out. They're walking barefoot across the shards of their own mistakes until they grew numb to the pain. People like that don't stay soft forever. They harden in all the right places. They sharpen in all the ways you didn't expect. Comfort is a trap, dressed like a gift. It makes you believe you're safe, when really you're just stagnant. You keep repeating the same habits, same thoughts, same reactions, because it feels familiar. But familiar doesn't mean right. Familiar doesn't mean growth. It just means you're scared to let your world get shaken. Meanwhile, the people around you aren't scared anymore. They hit their breaking point and decided they weren't going to live inside the same shell for another day. They chose the discomfort you avoid, and that discomfort rewarded them with strength. You ever notice how the people who grow the fastest are the ones who've gone through the most? Not because life favors them, but because they stopped waiting for life to be gentle. They let the world bruise them a little. They let truth sting. They let failure slap them awake. While you were protecting your ego, they were destroying theirs so they could rebuild something real. And now they're miles ahead, not because they're better, but because they were willing to feel what you keep running from. And the wild part, their growth puts a spotlight on your avoidance. Suddenly you see the contrast, their clarity against your confusion, their courage against your hesitation, their movement against your stillness. It's uncomfortable, isn't it? To look at someone who changed in the time it took you to hold on to your excuses. You want to believe they had it easier, that they got lucky, that life opened a door for them. But deep down, you know they opened that door themselves while you stood staring at yours, waiting for a sign. Growth isn't polite. It doesn't tap you on the shoulder and ask if you're ready. It's messy, painful, raw. It demands sacrifice. It demands honesty. It demands that you step out of the cozy little story you keep telling yourself. But you can't move if you're too busy convincing yourself that comfort is the same thing as peace. Peace comes after the chaos, not before it. Comfort just delays the chaos until it finally explodes in your face. Meanwhile, the person who changed last night, they embraced their chaos. They let it break them enough to rebuild. They walked through the fire you're still scared to touch. And because of that, they walked out different, faster, sharper, lighter. You're not slower because anything is wrong with you. You're slower because you haven't suffered enough to want to move. They grew because staying the same hurt more than changing. You stay the same because the pain hasn't caught up to you yet. You ever talk to someone and feel like you're having two different conversations at the same time, one with the person standing in front of you, and one with the version of them that only exists in your memory. That's what happens when you're the only one still treating today like yesterday. Everyone else wakes up, shifts, adjusts, rearranges themselves, and you keep insisting the world hasn't changed at all. It's almost comical, really, how the mind clings to its old files even after the system has updated. You walk around assuming people should act the way they used to, think the way they used to, feel the way they used to, completely unaware that you're speaking to someone who outgrew those patterns while you were still romanticizing them. People don't stay trapped inside the versions you keep locked in your head. They shed them, quietly, efficiently, sometimes violently. One night, one decision, one moment of honesty with themselves is all it takes for them to step out of the skin you're still trying to fit them into, but you insist on reading them through yesterday's lens like you're flipping through an old photo album and pretending the pictures are still alive. You meet them with old expectations, old assumptions, old interpretations, and then you wonder why nothing makes sense anymore. The truth is, you're not talking to who they are, you're talking to who they were, and that version doesn't even live there anymore. It's wild how stubborn the human mind can be. You notice the slight changes, the way they pause differently, the way they no longer entertain certain conversations, the way their tone carries a new firmness, but you brush it off, convincing yourself everything is normal, because accepting that someone has changed forces you to admit something even more uncomfortable, that you haven't, that you're still walking around with yesterday's mindset while the people around you are already building their tomorrow. You treat today like a rerun, expecting the scenes to play out exactly as they always have, while everyone else is already improvising new lines. And that's why you feel out of sync. That's why you feel like you're walking into a room where everyone already knows something you don't. You're operating on old software, trying to run new reality. You respond to their old insecurities, not realizing they don't need that comfort anymore. You adjust your tone to their old fragility, not realizing they've grown tougher overnight. You try to soothe wounds they've already healed, try to avoid triggers they've already outgrown, try to solve problems they've already learned to handle without you. In your mind, they're still the same. In their world, they're anything but. And maybe the most ironic part is how offended you get when they don't fit the mold you keep pushing onto them. You call them distant, cold, changed, unpredictable, but really, they're just updated. They're operating from a place where yesterday's rules don't apply. They learned something last night, saw something, felt something, confronted something, and it shifted them. While you were sleeping, they were waking up. While you were replaying old stories, they were tearing out entire chapters. And people who change like that fast, decisively, quietly, they don't explain themselves. They don't sit down to give you a detailed report on why they're not the same anymore. They simply stop entertaining what no longer aligns with who they're becoming. They stop shrinking. They stop waiting. They stop repeating the cycles you're still comfortable with. And without noticing, you start becoming the only one stuck in yesterday. The only one using outdated scripts. The only one trying to drag people back into versions of themselves they already buried. It's unsettling, isn't it? To realize you might be the last one to catch up. To realize that the people you thought you knew have been shedding layers while you're still admiring the old ones. To realize that you're not being left out because they changed, but because you didn't. You keep expecting the world to stay still so you don't have to move. But the world doesn't freeze just because you're scared of motion. People don't pause their evolution to match your pace. They shift, they stretch, they rise, and if you don't rise too, you end up watching everyone from a distance, confused about why you can't recognize them anymore. But maybe the real joke is this: you keep treating today like yesterday because it's easier than admitting today demands something new from you. Something braver, something sharper, something uncomfortable. Yesterday lets you stay small. Today doesn't. You ever look at someone and feel like they're holding up a mirror you didn't ask to see? Not a gentle, flattering mirror, the kind that exposes every hesitation you thought you'd hidden. That's what happens when their transformation outpaces yours. Their new strength doesn't just shine, it exposes every crack you've been trying to paint over. Their transformation exposes your hesitation. You see them standing taller, speaking clearer, moving with a conviction they didn't have before. And suddenly, all the excuses you've been feeding yourself start to sound ridiculous even to you. People changing isn't the uncomfortable part. The uncomfortable part is what their change reveals about you. They grow, and suddenly you realize how long you've been stalling. They take risks, and you become painfully aware of how tightly you cling to your comfort. They stop tolerating things they once let slide, and you're forced to see how often you've tolerated things that slowly drained you. Their evolution shines a spotlight on your stagnation, and that spotlight burns. It burns because you can't blame anyone else. When the evidence is right there in front of you, you didn't move. And maybe that's what irritates you the most. Not that they shifted, but that they did it without waiting for your permission, without checking whether you were ready to handle the upgraded version of them. They didn't hold themselves back so you could feel comfortable. They didn't shrink to match your pace. They didn't freeze themselves just because you were scared of your next step. They grew anyway, and their growth forces you to confront the truth. There was never anything stopping you from evolving except the story you kept repeating in your head. You watch them now, and everything about them feels unfamiliar. Not in a bad way, but in a way that makes your stomach twist. Their presence carries a new weight, a new awareness, a new sense of self-respect. They speak differently, not aggressively, just honestly. They don't tiptoe around people's feelings the way they used to. They don't apologize for breathing. They don't second-guess every word they say. And while a part of you might admire it, another part feels exposed, almost threatened, because their confidence highlights your doubts. Their clarity contrasts your confusion. Their courage makes your fear look louder than ever. You're not threatened by them. You're threatened by what they reveal about you. Their improvement puts pressure on the parts of you that have been collecting dust. You start noticing how often you downplay your own ideas, how many times you bite your tongue when you want to speak, how easily you settle for half efforts, half decisions, half versions of yourself. And each time you notice it, a voice in your head whispers, "They stopped doing that. Why haven't you?" Humans hate being shown their own weaknesses, especially by accident. You want to believe they've changed too fast or too much or suddenly, but deep down you know they just changed first. They got tired of their own patterns before you got tired of yours. They stopped being afraid before you chose to. They hit their breaking point while you kept cushioning yours. And now every bit of strength they display feels like proof that you could have grown too if you weren't so skilled at hesitation. And hesitation is such a clever little liar. It whispers, "Now's not the right time." It says, "You're not ready yet." It becomes your shield, your excuse, your comfort blanket. But once you see someone else push past theirs, your own hesitation suddenly looks flimsy, transparent, foolish. It loses its power. It loses its logic. It becomes exactly what it always was, a delay, nothing more. That's why their growth unsettles you. It breaks the illusion that you've been hiding behind, the illusion that you'll change one day, that you'll become confident, eventually that you'll take the leap when everything lines up. But you know now, because of them, that one day is just hesitation wearing perfume. Eventually is fear wearing makeup. And when everything lines up is simply your way of saying you're scared to jump. Their transformation shows you what it looks like when someone stops negotiating with their limitation. And once you've seen that, once you've witnessed that shift in someone who was once just like you can't pretend you don't know what's possible anymore. Their evolution exposes your hesitation, not to embarrass you, but to hold up a brutally honest truth. You only stay the same because you choose to. You start to notice it first in the way they talk, not the words, they've used those before, but the tone, the rhythm, the strange new steadiness that wasn't there last night. It's like someone tightened the strings inside them, tuned them, sharpened them. They speak with this uncomfortable confidence, the kind that doesn't ask for your approval or check whether you're keeping up. And it's funny, isn't it, how such a small shift in someone else's voice can make your whole world tilt a little. Because deep down, you remember how their voice used to waver, how they used to look to you for reassurance, how they once bent themselves into shapes just to feel accepted. But not anymore. Something in them changed, and now every syllable they drop feels like a reminder that you didn't. Then you see it in their posture. People underestimate posture, but it gives everything away. They stand like they're finally taking up the space they withheld from themselves for years. Shoulders back, chin steady, eyes not darting around to make sure everyone's comfortable. They move with this strange ease, like they've stopped dragging the invisible chains they used to carry everywhere. And when you watch them walk into a room now, you realize it. They're not waiting for permission to exist. They're not asking the world to let them breathe. They're not shrinking to make anyone feel taller. And that quiet boldness of theirs creates a kind of pressure in the air that you can feel right against your ribs. Their conversations change too. They don't waste time on the same old trivialities, the safe, predictable cliches people use to avoid truth. They talk about real things now. Their pain, their growth, their mistakes, their boundaries, their wants. And the worst part is they speak about all of it without flinching. You remember when they used to hide their feelings like fragile glass, scared someone might drop them. You remember when they used to swallow their pain until it nearly choked them. But now, they drag the truth out into the light without hesitation. And you sit there, listening, realizing that the reason it feels so unsettling is because you're still terrified of your own truth. Their habits shift next. The small ones first. They stop replying to every message instantly. They stop showing up for people who drain them. They stop giving explanations to those who don't deserve them. They stop pretending to be unaffected. They pause before they say yes. They think before they let someone back in. And while it looks like simple behavioral changes on the surface, you can sense the deeper message humming beneath it. They finally chose themselves. Not in a selfish way, but in a way that exposes how rarely you choose yourself. Then comes the part that stings the most, their silence. There's a different texture to it now. It's not the silence of suppression or fear or uncertainty. It's a deliberate quiet, a controlled quiet, the kind that says, I don't need to explain myself anymore. When they go quiet now, it doesn't feel like distance. It feels like dignity. And that forces you to recognize how often your own silence comes from fear, how often your quiet moments are just you avoiding the mirror because you're scared of what you'll see. You notice the way they look at you too, not with hostility or coldness, but with this unsettling clarity. They're not blinded by old memories anymore. They're not softened by familiarity. They see you exactly as you are now, not as you once were. And that makes your skin crawl a little because you realize how much you've relied on people. Seeing an outdated version of you, a version you've outgrown but still hide behind. Their new clarity exposes your old disguises. Even the way they carry their pain has changed. They're not romanticizing it anymore. Not wearing it like some tragic badge of honor. Their wounds aren't excuses now. They're lessons. Their scars aren't stories of suffering. They're maps showing where they refuse to return. And watching them handle their pain with such sharp honesty forces you to admit how often you cling to yours just to justify staying the same. But the final shift, the one that truly shakes you, is this peculiar peace they've developed. Not the soft, delicate peace people pretend to have for show. This is a grounded peace, a scarred peace. A peace born from breaking and rebuilding. It sits in their eyes, in their breath, in the calm steadiness of their presence. And when you stand next to them, that peace becomes a mirror reflecting every storm you've been avoiding. You see how long you've been circling the same problems, how long you've been negotiating with your fears, how long you've been delaying the version of yourself you keep promising will appear someday. Their presence forces you to confront the truth, not because they preach it, not because they demand it, but because their transformation creates a contrast you can't escape. Their new self exposes the pieces of you that haven't moved. You ever notice how people beg for change, cry for a breakthrough, sit there waiting for something big to happen? But when the moment finally comes, when the ground starts shaking beneath their feet, they panic, they hesitate, they doubt. It's almost funny. They spend years praying, hoping, convincing themselves that one day everything will fall into place, that something huge is coming. And then it does. And suddenly, they're scared. Suddenly, they're not so sure they're ready. People love to say they're waiting for the right moment, that perfect opportunity, the big break. They sit there tapping their fingers, watching the clock, convincing themselves that once the stars align, once everything feels just right, they'll make their move. But here's the punchline. They're lying to themselves, to everyone around them, because deep down, they don't want the moment to come. Not really. Because if it does, that means they have to do something about it. And that's the scariest part, isn't it? Actually moving instead of just talking about moving. Oh, but life? Life's got a funny way of calling your bluff. You spend years begging for something, and then boom, there it is right in front of you, the moment, the shot, the thing you swore you were waiting for. And you'd think people would grab it with both hands, right? Laugh, celebrate, run through that open door, but no. What do? They freeze. they hesitate. They start making excuses. Maybe it's not the right time. Maybe I'm not ready. Maybe I should wait just a little longer. And just like that, the moment slips away. Gone, vanished. Just another almost in a life full of almosts. You see, people aren't really waiting for the moment. They're waiting for the fear to disappear. That little voice in their head that says, what if I fail? What if I look stupid? What if this isn't what I thought it would be? They think that if they wait long enough, one day they'll wake up fearless. But that's not how it works. No, fear doesn't leave. You just have to move through it. That's what separates the ones who make it from the ones who don't. It's not talent. It's not luck. It's not some magical formula. It's the ones who feel the fear, hear the doubt, see the risks, and still move. The ones who decide, ready or not, I'm doing this. Because let's be honest, nobody ever really feels ready. Nobody wakes up one day with zero doubt, zero hesitation, zero fear. The difference is some people let fear stop them, and some people use it as fuel. And here's the real joke. The moment they were waiting for, it's already here. Right now. Not tomorrow, not next year, not when they feel ready. The door is open. The opportunity is staring them in the face, tapping its foot, waiting. But will they step through, or will they sit there paralyzed, watching it close? Because life doesn't wait. Time doesn't care if you're scared. The train leaves the station whether you're on it or not. Most people, they watch the train leave over and over and over again, and then they sit around shaking their heads wondering why nothing ever changes. But deep down, they know why. They just don't want to admit it. They don't want to admit that they had their chance, that they could have taken it, but they chose not to, and instead of owning up to it, they'll tell themselves a nice little story. It wasn't the right time. It wasn't meant to be. Maybe next time. But what if there is no next time? What if this was it? What if this was the only shot they were ever going to get and they let it pass? That's the thing no one wants to think about. That's the thought that keeps them up at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment in their heads, wishing they could go back and do it differently. But they can't. Because life doesn't do reruns. There's always going to be fear. There's always going to be doubt. But the ones who win, they don't wait for the fear to go away. They don't wait for the perfect moment. They take the shot even when their hands are shaking. They move forward even when their heart is pounding. They step through the door even when their mind is screaming at them to stay where it's safe. Because deep down, they know something most people never figure out. There is no perfect moment. There's just now. And now is all you've got. People love to pretend they're in control. They wake up every morning, follow the same routine, same roads, same conversations, and tell themselves they're running the show, that they decide what happens next. But deep down, somewhere beneath all that certainty, there's a whisper they try to ignore. A tiny little voice that says, what if you're not in charge? What if something bigger is pulling the strings? But who wants to think about that, right? Who wants to admit that maybe, just maybe, they're not the mastermind of their own story? So they fight it. They cling to their plans like a gambler holding on to his last chip. They map out their futures down to the last detail, convinced that if they just work hard enough, plan well enough, they'll get exactly what they want. And for a while, it looks like it's working. Everything lines up. Everything makes sense. They start thinking, I knew it. I knew I had this under control. And that's when it happens. That's when life laughs in their face. A door slams shut. A road disappears. A sure thing turns into a dead end. And suddenly all that control they thought they had, gone. Just like that. And they panic, they scramble, they start asking why. Why is this happening? Why did everything fall apart? Why did the thing they wanted so badly slip through their fingers? But the real question isn't why. The real question is who? Because maybe, just maybe, it wasn't an accident. Maybe that thing they were chasing, that opportunity, that relationship, that perfect little plan, maybe it wasn't theirs to have. Maybe someone, somewhere, saw what they couldn't see, knew what they refused to know. And instead of letting them run head first into a disaster, they did the only thing they could do. They shut the door. But people don't like closed doors. No, no, no. They pound on them, kick them, try to pick the lock. They beg and bargain and cry, convinced that if they just push hard enough, they'll get back what they lost, because in their minds, losing means failure. Losing means they did something wrong. But what if losing was the best thing that ever happened to them? What if that locked door wasn't a punishment, but protection? Ah, but they don't see it that way, not at first. At first, all they feel is the pain, the frustration, the humiliation. They walk around with their fists clenched, their hearts heavy, replaying every moment, wondering what they could have done differently. They get angry at themselves, at life, at whoever it was that closed that door in the first place. But then something strange happens. Time passes, the dust settles, and one day out of nowhere they see it, the thing they missed before, the truth that was staring them in the face the whole time. That door, that lost opportunity, that thing they thought they needed, it wasn't for them. It never was. It was a trap. A lie, a mistake waiting to happen, and if they had gotten it, if they had forced their way through, they would have ended up somewhere dark, somewhere they were never meant to be. So now they have a choice. They can keep looking back, keep mourning what they thought they lost, or they can turn around and see what's ahead. Because while they were busy crying over a closed door, another one was opening, a better one, a bigger one. But here's the catch. Not everyone notices. Some people spend their whole lives standing in front of that locked door, refusing to move, refusing to see. And the ones who do move on, the ones who finally understand, they realize something that changes everything. They were never really in control. They never had the power they thought they did. And maybe, just maybe, that's a good thing. Because sometimes the things they don't get are the biggest blessings of all. People love certainty. They love guarantees, promises written in stone, neat little boxes with perfect little bows. They want to know what's coming next, because if they know, they don't have to worry. If they know, they can prepare. If they know, they can stay one step ahead of the game. But the game doesn't work like that. No, no, no. The game hates certainty. The game thrives on surprises. Just when you think you've got it all figured out, just when you think you can relax, it pulls the rug right out from under you. And you're left sitting in the dirt, wondering what the hell just happened. And that's when the real fun begins. Because now you're faced with something you didn't expect, something you didn't prepare for. And that's terrifying, isn't it? That feeling of losing control, that realization that you never really had it in the first place. People don't like that. They don't like feeling powerless. So what do? They scramble. They cling to whatever's left, trying to make sense of it all, trying to patch up the cracks and pretend that everything is fine. They tell themselves it's just a setback, just a minor inconvenience, just a small detour before they get back on track. But what if it's not? What if it's not a detour? What if it's a full stop? What if that plan they were so sure about, that future they had all mapped out, was never supposed to happen? What if the road ahead isn't broken? It's just gone. But that's a hard pill to swallow, isn't it? Because that means admitting they were wrong. That means letting go. And people hate letting go. They'd rather hold onto something broken than face the unknown. They'd rather suffer in a familiar hell than step into an unfamiliar heaven. Because at least the hell they know makes sense. At least they can predict the pain. But the unknown, that's risk. That's a blindfolded walk through the dark with no guarantee of what's waiting on the other side. But here's the thing, sometimes the unknown isn't a punishment. Sometimes the unknown is a gift. Sometimes that thing they're clinging to so desperately, the thing they swear they need, is the very thing holding them back. And the only way to move forward, the only way to win, is to let go. But letting go feels like losing. It feels like quitting. It feels like giving up. So they fight it. They resist. They push back against the change, against the shift, against the truth. Because deep down, they don't want to believe it. They don't want to see that the road is gone, that the door is closed, that what they wanted so badly is no longer an option. Because if they accept that, they have to accept something even worse. They have to accept that they wasted time. They have to accept that they put their energy, their heart, their soul into something that was never meant to be. And that's unbearable. So they pretend. They lie to themselves. They look for signs that maybe, just maybe, things will go back to the way they were. That if they just hold on a little longer, if they just try a little harder, everything will fall back into place. But it won't. It never does. Because once the game decides it's time to change, you don't get a vote. You don't get to argue. You don't get to stall. You have to move, whether you like it or not, whether you're ready or not, whether you understand it or not. And that's the part that breaks people. That's the part that drives them mad. Not the loss, not the confusion, not even the pain. It's the fact that they didn't get a choice. That someone made the choice for them. And they don't know whether to be angry, grateful, or afraid. Because what if, just what if, this isn't the end? What if this is just the beginning? What if everything they thought they lost was never meant to stay? What if, instead of holding on, instead of fighting, instead of begging for something that's already gone, they finally let go? People like to think they're in control. They wake up, make their little plans, follow their little routines, all while believing they have some say in how things unfold. Cute, isn't it? They really think if they just try hard enough, if they just want it bad enough, everything will go their way. But that's not how the game works. No, the game doesn't care about wants. The game doesn't care about effort. The game? It only respects moves. And the funniest part? Most people don't even realize they're playing. Oh, but they feel it. They feel it when the pieces start shifting, when the air gets heavy, when someone presses against the edges of their world, nudging them in a direction they don't want to go. That's when they start resisting. That's when they start digging their heels in, clinging to whatever scraps of stability they can find. Because if they just hold on tight enough, if they just refuse to budge, maybe things won't change. Maybe the storm will pass. Maybe the rules will bend. But that's not how this works. No, no, no. When the shift comes, when the pressure builds, when the invisible hand starts moving things around, it's not a suggestion. It's not an invitation. It's a demand. And people hate demands, don't they? They hate being told what to do. They hate being forced out of their comfort zones. They hate realizing they're not in control. So they fight it. They fight hard. They ignore the signs. They push back against the warnings. They cling to the old when the new is already knocking. And for a little while, it almost seems like they win. The world doesn't crumble. The ground doesn't crack. Everything looks the same, but that's just an illusion. That's just the game being patient, because the game, it never loses. And the longer they resist, the harder it gets. The more they refuse to move, the more it hurts when they're finally forced to. The little nudges turn into shoves, the whispers turn into screams. The tiny inconveniences turn into disasters, because they were never supposed to stay where they are. They were never supposed to hold on to that person, that job, that version of themselves. And the more they pretend otherwise, the more it costs them. Oh, and here's the real kicker. The longer they wait, the worse the fall. 'Cause see, change, it's funny like that. It's always coming, always creeping closer, always waiting for the moment when they finally have no choice but to listen. And when it strikes, when it finally hits, it doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't ease them into it. It rips them out of their comfort, tears them away from what they thought they couldn't live without, and throws them head first into the unknown. And that's when the fear sets in. That's when the panic takes hold. That's when they start looking for a way back, a way out, a way to undo what's already been set in motion, but it's too late. The doors they kept trying to hold open slammed shut. The roads they kept walking down, gone. The safety net they swore would always be there, vanished. And now they're forced to face what they should have seen all along. That this isn't about punishment. It's not about suffering. It's about alignment. It's about making sure they end up where they were always meant to be, but people don't see it like that, do they? No, they see it as loss. They see it as failure. They see it as the world turning against them, when really it's the world saving them. But that realization, it doesn't come easy. No, first comes the pain. First comes the confusion. First comes the desperate, hopeless search for a way back to before. And it's only when they finally stop fighting, when they finally accept what's happening, that they start to see the truth. That maybe, just maybe, this isn't the end of everything. That maybe, just maybe, this is the start of something better. People love comfort. They love familiarity. They love waking up every day knowing exactly how things are gonna go. Predictability makes them feel safe, makes them feel like they have a grip on things, like they can just keep walking the same path, seeing the same faces, doing the same little routine, and everything will be fine. But that's the thing about comfort. It's a trap. A beautifully decorated, perfectly disguised little cave. And the funniest part? Most people don't even realize they're locked inside. They don't see the bars. They don't hear the lock clicking every time they ignore that feeling in their gut, that little whisper telling them they're meant for more. Oh no. They tell themselves they're just being rational. They tell themselves they're just being practical. They tell themselves that stability is more important than growth, that security is better than risk. They call it being smart. But smart is knowing when the walls are closing in. Smart is recognizing when the thing you're clinging to is the very thing keeping you from moving forward. But people hate letting go. They hate it because letting go means trusting something they can't see, something they can't predict, something they don't control. And control, that's their favorite illusion. They need to believe they're the ones making the decisions. That if they just try hard enough, if they just fight hard enough, they can bend the world to their will. But the world doesn't bend for anyone. The world moves relentlessly, mercilessly, whether they like it or not. And the ones who refuse to move with it, they get dragged by circumstances, dragged by consequences, dragged by the very things they ignored when they had the chance to walk away. See, the signs are always there. The little red flags, the gut feelings, the moments that make their stomach twist, make their chest tighten, make them pause. But what do? They shake it off. They justify it. They tell themselves they're just being paranoid, just being impatient, just being scared. So they push the feeling down, swallow it, pretend it's not there. Because if they pretend hard enough, maybe it'll just disappear. But feelings don't disappear. No. They wait, they linger, they sit there growing heavier and heavier until one day, boom, they explode. And by then, it's too late. Because now they're trapped in something they should have left a long time ago. And now the exit isn't a simple step forward, it's a collapse. A messy, painful, soul-ripping collapse. And that's what happens when they don't listen. Because see, when something is no longer meant for you, life doesn't just gently nudge you away. No, at first, it gives you hints, small inconveniences, minor frustrations. But when you ignore those, it escalates. The discomfort grows. The tension builds. The thing you once loved starts feeling like a weight around your neck, something you have to force yourself to keep holding on to. And when you still refuse to move, that's when the universe stops being polite. That's when it rips things away. And the panic, the shock, the betrayal. People act outraged when something they refuse to let go of finally gets taken from them. They cry about how unfair it is, how cruel it is, how they never saw it coming. But deep down, they did see it coming. They felt it coming. They just didn't want to believe it. And here's the best part, the real joke. After all the kicking and screaming, after all the pain and resistance, after all the desperate attempts to hold on, they end up exactly where they were supposed to be all along. And when they finally step back and see it, when they realize that everything that fell apart, everything that collapsed was actually making space for something better, that's when they laugh, a quiet, almost embarrassed little laugh, because now they get it. Now they understand. But the price for that understanding? Oh, it's everything they weren't willing to let go of in the first place. People love the idea of control. Oh, they cling to it, grip it so tight their knuckles turn white. They walk around, puffing out their chests, pretending like they have a say in how the story unfolds. They make their little plans, set their little goals, draw up their little timelines, thinking they've got it all figured out. But the thing about control, it's a joke, a beautifully crafted illusion, a magic trick that keeps them comfortable, keeps them from seeing the truth. Because the truth is that they're not in control of anything. Not the people, not the circumstances, not even themselves half the time. They wake up thinking today's gonna go just like they planned. Then, bam! A phone call changes everything. A door slams shut. An opportunity slips through their fingers, and suddenly their whole world is flipped upside down. And oh, how they panic, how they scramble to fix things, to force things back into place, to make it work on their terms. But no matter how hard they fight, no matter how tightly they try to hold on, the pieces keep slipping through their fingers because it was never theirs to hold in the first place. But people, they don't like that answer. No. They don't want to hear that their plans mean nothing. They don't want to hear that something bigger is at play, something that laughs at their little attempts to control the uncontrollable. So they resist. They dig in their heels, grit their teeth, and keep pushing forward like they are the ones calling the shots. And every time they do, life just sits back and watches as they wear themselves out, as they break themselves, trying to fix things that were never meant to be theirs. And then, just when they're at their breaking point, just when they've exhausted every last bit of energy, life does something funny. It forces their hand, it shuts the door, it rips things away, and that's when the real show begins. That's when they start screaming about how unfair it is, about how cruel and undeserved and unexpected. Now that's funny, because the signs were always there. The warnings, the red flags, the gut feelings. They knew deep down that something wasn't right, that something was slipping, but instead of listening, they ignored it. And now they want to act surprised. That's the game, that's how it works. If you don't move when you're told, if you don't listen when the whispers come, the message gets louder. The shake becomes a shove. And if you still refuse, well, that's when things start getting ugly. That's when things get taken. And the funniest part, when it's all said and done, when the dust settles and they're standing there in the wreckage of what they tried so hard to keep, that's when the truth finally hits them. That's when they see. Because now, without all the noise, without all the distractions, they realize something. They were never supposed to have it in the first place. But oh, how they fight against it, how they mourn the loss of what was never meant to be theirs. They cry about missed opportunities, about wasted time, about how if only they had done this or done that, things would be different. If only. But it's not about if only, it's about what is. And what is that they were being led somewhere else the whole time. They just couldn't see it through the fog of their own desires. And here's where the joke really lands. Once they finally let go, once they finally stop forcing things, what happens? The right doors start opening, the right opportunities start appearing, things begin to flow instead of being forced. And suddenly everything they were so desperately trying to hold on to, it doesn't even matter anymore, because now they're standing in a place they never expected, a place they didn't even know existed, a place that actually fits. And that's when they realize they never needed control in the first place.